Joining us now, NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley and former U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst Barbara McQuade. Julia, let's start with a Salvadoran gentleman who entered the U.S. Some years ago. The Supreme Court left it up to the lower court to ensure he is returned to the U.S. There were some words used in all of this back and forth that has some people looking at some gray areas. Can you explain to me what those are?
Yeah, that's right, Jose. And that's why both sides are calling this a win, which, of course, is impossible when it comes down to the very binary decision of whether or not they're going to bring this man back from El Salvador. What the court said was that the words facilitate and effectuate that were used by the district court judge to tell the government how to bring back this man, that they needed to facilitate and effectuate his return, should have merely been facilitate. They say that is within the authority of the court to tell the government to do, but to tell the government to effectuate his return may be overstepping, going a bit too far, and stepping on some presidential authorities. So to that, of course, the Justice Department is considering that a win, but his lawyer actually sees it the other way. And this is what he said.
It seems that they're determined to try to kick the can and play games with this. I'm very reassured, though, that the district judge is not playing games with this and recognizes that a man's life is at stake here.
And when he's talking about kicking the can, he's referring to the Justice Department asking this lower court judge to put off her hearing until next week so that they could have more time to answer questions about how they plan to bring him back. But we just learned from our producer inside the courtroom that that hearing is still going forward as planned at 1 p.m. today here in Maryland.
So, if you would, Barbara, this whole thing of facilitate, effectuate, what it should have been just facilitate versus effectuate, it's like a lot of legal talk for two words. Can you kind of help explain that?
Yes. And so the question is this a win for Mr. Garcia or a win for the United States? I think it's both. But I think when you care about being returned to the United States, I think Mr. Garcia by far has the bigger victory here. The reason for the challenge with those words is, I think what the court wants to be able to tell the government is, you have to go back and try with all of your effort to bring him back. He was wrongfully removed from this country. He belongs here. You have an obligation to go get him, so go get him. The effectuate part, they thought, perhaps was too broad because there's no guarantee that the United States will be successful. So if they were ordered to effectuate, for example, and El Salvador said no, would the U.S. government then be required to use military force to go get him back? And I think the answer to that would be no, because of the Constitution's role for the president in leading foreign policy, military matters as the commander-in-chief, and national security matters. So facilitate means do everything you can to get him back. But of course, you can't control the actions of a foreign sovereign. And so we understand that you might not be able to make it happen.
And Julia, switching to the other case, the case of that Columbia grad student, he's a legal permanent resident. What's happening in court today?
Well, he's going before an immigration judge because he's been detained in Louisiana after he was arrested March 8th at Columbia University, where, as you said, he was a grad student and his U.S. citizen wife is just days away from giving birth to their first child. The immigration judge in this case has asked the United States to DHS to put forward evidence about why and on what grounds they want to deport him. He's a green card holder. And of course, you can't detain someone indefinitely if there's no case to deport him. So it's a matter of deportation versus release here. Rather than giving evidence about his ties to any kind of violent actors or anything he may have done, instead what they did was they put forward a 2-page memo from Secretary of State Marco Rubio that describes him and one other person whose name is redacted as having a presence in the United States that is somehow at odds with the interest of U.S. foreign policy. So that's not really going as far as providing evidence, merely saying this is the policy we are following. So we'll see what that immigration court judge has to say about that.
And so, Barbara, what legal authority or legal standing does the State Department have in expelling Khalil or anyone else who is either a visa stay or even a green card holder?
Well, one of the things that the Immigration and Nationality Act does, it does give the president great deference to administer our nation's immigration laws. And there's one provision in there that says, if the Secretary of State makes a finding that there is a reasonable basis to believe that a person poses a significant threat to the foreign policy of the United States and they are a non-citizen, then the Secretary of State may designate that person for removal. Now, that doesn't give them carte blanche because the person is still entitled to due process under the Fifth Amendment, which typically means notice and an opportunity to be heard, which had not happened to date. But it also means when reviewing an agency decision through a case called Matthews versus Eldridge, that a court will consider the interests of the government, the interests of the person, and the process and the risks of whether that process is going to violate the rights of the individual. So I imagine the court will apply that standard. It's a bit of a balancing test to decide whether this is legitimate or whether it is pretextual. Just saying that this is harming our ability to fight anti-Semitism around the world, I think you've got to find more specifically about what it is he said or did that caused Marco Rubio to reach that conclusion. And to date, we've heard really just sort of that blanket allegation without any facts to support it. So I imagine that's what will be at issue at the hearing.
And Julia, President Trump yesterday during that cabinet meeting that was televised talked about undocumented farm and hotel workers leaving the U.S. and then coming right back in legally. What is that all about? Is there policy here?
You know what? The only comments that I can think of that it echoes, because we haven't seen a new policy come out on this, is it's similar to what Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has said when she's been asking immigrants across the country to self-deport and then get in line to come back in. But the key details they're leaving out is that sometimes it could take more than a decade to be able to come back in. There's oftentimes a waiting period, especially if you were found to have been in the country illegally. And then there's a tough process to climb through. You've got to go in for a health check. You have to be able to apply. There's a long line for people to come through, and it's made longer if you've had any period where you were in the United States illegally. And so this idea about being able to come right back and continue working really lacks a lot of context.